Welcome to day 34 of Purpose-Driven Church for Unificationists. Today we're continuing the chapter on how Jesus attracted crowds, and we're looking now at creating an atmosphere of acceptance. I apologize for the lighting. It's just the way it is this time of the day with the sun coming through the window. I hope it's not too distracting. I really love this section a lot. I just felt like there was lots of really great nuggets of practical advice in this chapter. So I'm going to go right into it. So he says that just like plants need the right climate and conditions to grow, so do churches. The right climate for church growth is an atmosphere of acceptance and love. Growing churches love, and loving churches grow. It seems obvious, but it is often overlooked. For your church to grow, you must be nice to people when they show up. Long before the pastor preaches, the visitors are already deciding whether or not they will come back. They are asking themselves, do I feel welcome here? At Saddleback, we have thought through a strategy for creating a climate of love and acceptance that visitors can feel. We monitor our effectiveness on a weekly basis by asking first-time visitors to give us their frank, anonymous first impressions of our church. So they send out a letter to first-time guests with a postage-paid envelope and 3 questions on there. And they really try to get people's honest and anonymous feedback. He says that we've now received thousands of these cards, and nearly 90% answer the first question with some variation of the sentence, I noticed the warmth and friendliness of the people. He says, to make an impact on a visitor, love must be expressed in a practical way. Even if a church genuinely feels compassion for the unchurched, that compassion might not be expressed in ways the unchurched understand. Love is more than a feeling, it is a behavior. It means being sensitive to someone else's needs and putting them ahead of our own. He goes on to talk about how the pastor of the church sets the tone and atmosphere of the congregation. If you are a pastor, he says, and you want to know the warmth of your church, put the thermometer in your own mouth. He goes on to give examples of this, and he says that in general, likability is a really important factor. If people like you, they'll listen to you. If they don't like you, they will ignore you or discount your message. How do you become likable? He says it's simple. Love people. When people know you love them, they listen to you. Then he goes on to share a few practical advice on how we can help people to feel loved and cared for. First one is to memorize names. He says remembering names shows that you're interested in people. He says, while I don't have a particularly good memory, I work hard at remembering names. In the early years of Saddleback, I took pictures of people and made flashcards to help me remember their names. I knew every person's name in our church, up to about 3,000 in attendance. When you work hard at remembering people's names, it pays great relational dividends. It's kind of interesting because I remember there was a young man who was really struggling with our church. And one of the things that added to his frustration was that people couldn't remember his name. They often got him mixed up with his siblings. He doesn't really look like his siblings, but he really felt like, well, people don't really care about me. They don't remember my name. And this has happened to many people who, maybe they have other struggles or other difficulties, but not remembering their name was an added maybe salt on the wound, I guess you could say. So that's a very practical thing, not just for the pastor to do, but for everybody to do. He says also, personally greet people before and after service. Be approachable. Don't hide out in your study. For the first 3 years of our church, we met in a fenced high school where everyone had to exit through the same gate. Each week, I personally greeted every person who came to our church. They couldn't get out without passing by me. He says, get out among the crowd and talk to people. It shows you are interested in them personally. Don't miss an opportunity to be with people when you have the chance. We do not have holy huddles before our services. We get only 1 shot a week to have contact with many of the people in our crowd. So when they come, I want every staff member and every key leader interacting with people. Touch people is the third one. He says, at Saddleback, we believe in a high-touch ministry. We give a lot of hugs and handshakes and pats on the back. Our world is filled with lonely people who are starving for the affirmation of a loving touch. Many individuals live by themselves and have told me the only loving physical contact they ever get is at church. And he goes on to share some very personal stories of people that, just a simple touch, a hug, a hand around the shoulder made such a difference in their life. They were going through something really difficult and nobody knew what it was, but just that positive touch, that affirmation, made a world of difference to them. He says, "You never know how a tender word and a caring touch will make all the difference in the world to someone. Behind every smile is a hidden hurt that a simple expression of love may heal." And then lastly, he talks about to use a warm personal style in writing to visitors. He says that when he writes people, he simply signs it by saying, Rick. He wants visitors to feel they can relate to him on a first person basis. He says if you send letters to visitors, write it just as if you talk to people, not in a stilted formal language. He says, I received a visitor letter once that said, "Our church would like to acknowledge your presence with us last Sunday and extend to you a cordial invitation to return on the next Lord's Day." Does anybody really talk like that? Instead say, "It was really great to have you. Hope you can come back." Don't write like you're drafting correspondence for British royalty. And then finally, he ends by talking about how one important decision that each pastor has to make is that if they're interested in impressing people or influencing people, because you can impress people from a distance with your way of speaking and your knowledge and so on and so forth. But if you really want to influence people, you have to get up close to them. You have to get really personal. You have to love them. Proximity determines impact. He says, I think the reason some pastors stay distant from their people is because they aren't impressive up close. So he says, if a church wants to attract a crowd, both the pastor and the members must act in a loving ways toward outsiders. You must demonstrate the attitude, if you come here, we're going to love you. No matter who you are, what you look like, or what you've done, you're going to be loved in this place. So lots of really great tidbits there. Hope you enjoyed that. So tomorrow we'll look at accepting without approving. Thank you.